Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
And welcome into BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. We are live coast to coast on the BetQL network and wherever you may be in the world, right there inside your Odyssey app. You can always get us on demand every weekend. The app is free, you know. Download it, AUDACY. And then whether you hear us live on Friday nights, Saturday mornings, or, like I said, on demand in podcast form, you get prepped for every single weekend's action on the college football landscape. And the college football landscape could be shifting again. We'll get to that news of Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and the Pac-2 may be having some new life breathed into it, becoming the Pac-6 or more. We'll see. We'll get into that. We'll get into some big Week 3 matchups because we all knew. We all had BC Mizzou pegged as a big one coming into this year, I'm sure, but that one of the few ranked matchups this week. But let's start by looking back at Week 2, boys, and we could dive into Michigan, Texas, and we will get to it in just a second. But the big news of Week 2 was the upset in South Bend, the worst loss by spread for Notre Dame since it lost its season opener as a 28-point favorite against Northwestern nearly 3 decades ago, 1995, as the Salukis, Northern Illinois, roll into South Bend and in the shadow of touchdown Jesus drop the Irish 16-14 as 28.5-point dogs, 22-1 on the money line pregame. And yeah, the story of NIU going into South Bend and winning this game is a cool one. Their head coach does a great job of giving an emotional interview on the field after the fact. But really, the takeaway from this, John Martin, is that Notre Dame goes from feeling like a shoo-in, given their schedule, to make the new 12-team CFP. They were minus 375 at BetMGM going into the game, to now a long shot, 16th on the board at BetMGM at 3-1 with games left against Louisville. That's at home. Florida State, that's at home. And at USC to wrap up. All of a sudden, given that offensive performance last week, this is no shoe-in to be a playoff team at all.
No, and Riley Leonard's hurt. I mean, so I got to tell you, in terms of the warp speed and just how quickly their season changed, I mean, Week 1, they get probably, one of the best wins in college football this year in Kyle Field. Week 2, they suffer what is undoubtedly going to be the worst loss in college football. So when I thought I was going to be able to kind of make some progress with Marcus Freeman and how opinion of he went out and had to do this. So now I'm like back to square one. I don't know what to think of the guy now. And I don't really know what to think of this team. I mean, I guess I know what to think of this team. They're not dynamic. And so they're going to play games. And now that Riley Leonard is hurt, even more so, I mean, it's just impossible to know how to, how to sit right now. And week in and week out, who am I getting? I guess it's easy to get your team ready to go into Kyle Field. Hey, we're big underdogs, nobody thinks we have a chance. We're the team that's everybody's saying is going to be out of the playoff. And then they lose as a 25-point favorite. So, I mean, it's just hard to really know what to expect from them week in and week out other than ugly football.
What does Oregon do? Is this what they do? That's what Oregon. That's what they do, right? My fingers are all broke, so they don't really work.
Wait. It made a little. Hold on. For those of you watching on YouTube on the Odyssey Sports channel, it just made Choppy went like that. It made like little heart emojis on the screen somehow. How did you do that,
dude?
Is that an RJ Choppy only? There it is again.
I did it again. Oh my god, that's amazing.
What the hell's going on? This is why you got to watch the show.
Listen, I
tried. It didn't do it for me.
I'm a wizard, right? I'm a wizard, so I don't know what happened there, but
the big O for Oregon.
The big O for Oregon. That's what their name is. They are perennially overrated. And I'm just done with them. I'm just done with Notre Dame. I'm done with having them thrown down my throat. I'm done with them making the college playoff every 4 years. I'm done with them and their, high grass and thick ankles that they roll out there with at whatever stadium, Notre Dame Stadium. I'm done with touchdown Jesus, even though, respect. But
God bless.
I'm just done with it, man. Like every year, it's the same thing with them. And yeah, that was a nice win at A&M. Sure, cool. Like A&M's a tough place to play. 105,000, screaming idiots down there. But it's at the end of the day, like they played a team that had no quarterback in A&M, and they beat them. And A&M's gonna, unless A&M goes 9-3 and Notre Dame runs the table. I don't know how Notre Dame has a case to be made. Like, you can't lose to Northern Illinois at home, even if you have one loss, and say, we're it. We should be in. Not when you play the schedule they're going to play the rest of the way. It was very, and like John said, especially with Riley Leonard being, banged up, it's more of the same with them. They're far more. The perception of them does not meet the reality of what they are.
And more to the point, I think the other thing that John mentioned is this is like a thing with Marcus Freeman now, right? Like this is the third loss of the Freeman era at Notre Dame as a 16-point or more favorite. You remember the Stanford and Marshall losses. Like This is more routine than not now that some group of five patsy comes in and beats the Irish at home. Like, that's unacceptable at this level. And again, to your point, Choppy, about this team being expected to be in the playoff, they have the defense to be a playoff team. They do. They have the defense to be a playoff team, but there's nothing else on the other side of the ball save Riley Leonard. And now with Riley Leonard hurt, it's like, well, I guess we're just going to have to try. We're going to have to try to win these games Iowa style, 13-10 every week, John.
Yeah, I mean, how else can they do it? I mean, and I will say this, like, I don't think it's a great look for Freeman, because we saw what, Riley Leonard looked like with Elko. I mean, he helped Elko get the job at A&M in so many ways, right? He looked like a dynamic, offensive player of the year type for Elko. And it's like he's on a leash of, he's really laboring down there at Notre Dame. And again, I know that that's going to be a different style, and they do want to win with their defense, but I had higher hopes. I did. I had higher hopes for him there in that offense, and I thought maybe we'd finally see, okay, we're going to spread this thing out, we're going to get it up, and it seems like Marcus Freeman's just never going to be that guy.
Yeah. Notre Dame's, like I said, third loss of the Freeman era as a 16-point or more favorite. They're now ranked 18th in the country, and they'll travel to West Lafayette to take on the Boilermakers on Saturday. For the other big game that took place, I'll be honest, I'll just own it. I didn't think Michigan was going to fall this far this year. I also didn't think this much of Texas, Choppy, but they go into Ann Arbor, and they don't just handle business. Like, they dog walk the Wolverines, and 31-12 makes it sound closer than it was at most points throughout that game. And Quinn Ewers, legit Heisman Trophy candidate, now the favorite at plus 550. That came way down this week as well, as he went for 246 and 3 touchdowns. Hasn't turned the ball over either.
Look, I thought this game going in was more likely that Texas would blow out Michigan than Michigan wins the game. It turned out to be that way. It's about, Texas is kind of where Michigan was like 2 years ago, or maybe even last year, because Michigan 2 years ago made the Final Four, loses to TCU. Texas last year made the Final Four, loses to Washington. Even though that score was closer than the game, Washington had it sewn up. I think right now you could easily make the case Texas is the best team in the country, and they've got a quarterback who is a legit Heisman candidate with about 4 or 5 other players, but they're loaded. They're always loaded talent-wise. They've been loaded talent-wise since 1953 or whatever. They underachieve often, because they've got one title since Vietnam, and it took Superman to do that. But they are every bit as good as anybody else this year. And Michigan is, I think, back to being Michigan. Outside of the Connor Stallions era, they are Texas A&M with better marketing. They are 8-4 every year outside of the Connor Stallions era, and everybody treats them like they are the best program in the country. They've got so many fans. Like, their fame and their production do not match up. And it's glorious to see, because that's a tainted title, but I'll live with it. I'll live with it, right? It's a piece of metal. That's what Rob Manfred told us. Piece of metal. So I'll live with the championship they've got, but they're back to where they belong. They're back to where they belong at 8-4 every year.
John, it feels like for this year's hunk of metal, it might get decided not just SEC-wise, but at least placement for the playoff-wise. Week 8, October 19th in Austin, when the Longhorns host the Dogs.
Yeah. Buddy. I mean, that is as good as it gets. And yeah, I think obviously, when you're talking about a team like Texas that was, ranked in the, top 3, top 5 preseason, it's not catching anybody by surprise. But what I will say is that I've just been really, really impressed with Sarkisian and the play calling. He's really pushing it to the metal, and I like that. I think Michigan came into the year overrated. I think we're sort of learning that, right? You had the quarterback problems, and you couldn't decide on one, and you really have no good options, right? But you look at their skill, and now, man, are they going to be 6-6 even? Are they going to a bowl game? Like, they could be 5-7. That's on the table. I think RJ's right. Like, probably going to look back at so much, for the Connor Stallions, but it's also, Harbaugh. Harbaugh is great. He's one of the greatest coaches to ever live. He goes to the Chargers last week, for the first time, and leads them to a week 1 win where Herbert didn't even play well. Like, the guy is just really elite at what he does. And I think, Michigan obviously did that and finally got the title. And now you're kind of going to, I think, slide back to, 8-4 feels like a reasonable standard. But it ain't going to look anywhere like what it looked like with Harbaugh.
Choppy, Texas still 5-1 to win the national title, third on the board at BetMGM. Is that enough value for you to still put in a ticket on the Horns if you haven't yet?
Yeah, I think it is. You're getting plus money on a guy who's got, he's a really good quarterback. Quinn's a really, really good player. And look, they're an offense first team playing in an offense first world. Are they? If they were to play Georgia tomorrow, who wins? It's pretty close, and it all depends on where those games are. Neutral site at Georgia, at Texas, at Ohio State, at Texas. I think what you're seeing though is that as we get deeper into the season, and we're still at the very early part of it, but we're putting this thing into tiers, and they're certainly on tier 1. There's certainly, to me at least, there's certainly a group at Ohio State and Georgia. And then you're going to have a little bit of a gap, and then you're going to get the rest of your teams out there. But I think clearly right now they have shown themselves to be part of the big boy club.
Yeah, John, that's the thing. Like, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, as Choppy just alluded to, at the top of the board at BetMGM for the national championship. Georgia less than 3-1 now, plus 275. Buckeyes are plus 350, and Texas, I just mentioned a second ago, 5-1. Is there any value on those three for you right now for a national championship bet, knowing that Texas and Georgia seem to be headed for a collision course, not just week 8 in Austin, but maybe to meet again in Atlanta down the line the first weekend in December?
Yeah, I still think Georgia plus anything, man, is value, because who's stopping them? It ain't Texas. It ain't. We could hype it up. We can handicap it. We will. But, Georgia is just I don't see a weakness. It doesn't really matter who's in, who's out, who's hurt, who's not. Defense-wise to the NFL. They got Carson Beck at quarterback. They got that offense humming. They're hanging 50 on pretty much any – just absolutely. It's hard for me to think this college – it's Georgia's to lose. I'll put it that way. They should have been in the playoff last year. They unfortunately lose the SEC championship game to Bama. Unfortunate time to take there. What can you do? I just think it's theirs to lose. So you give me a plus sign in front of Georgia. I'm going to call that value, man. I'm going to call it value.
They laid 24.5 on the road at Kentucky Saturday night. We'll get into that one in a couple minutes. And at least one other team in the SEC that probably thinks they should be involved in this conversation as well, headed out on the road for a big noon game on Saturday. Alabama, Wisconsin to talk about as well. I mentioned it earlier. BC and Missouri, because there's one we all saw coming a mile away this offseason. That would be a big early season marquee matchup. Don't think so. We'll get into all those. Also, the news of Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, that 4 schools are leaving the Mountain West for the Pac, soon to be 6. We'll get into all of it, plus our best bets before we wrap up. Alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin, I'm Chris Mack, and this is BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Oh! Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
It is BetQLU with you every Friday night and Saturday morning, getting you ready for college football action. It is week 3 alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. You could also watch the show. You're listening live coast to coast on the BetQL network, or maybe getting us on demand inside that free Odyssey app, AUDACY, if you haven't downloaded it yet. But you could also watch on the Odyssey Sports channel on YouTube as well. In just a few minutes, the Pac-2 may become the Pac-6. Well, no, it will become the Pac-6, and maybe even more than that, and an official conference again sometime soon. We'll talk about what's going on with the rating of the Mountain West by the Pac, whatever number you want to throw after it. And we also will get you our best bets for this week as well. But let's dive into the big games of this weekend. And let's start. I mentioned the one team in the SEC that might want to insert itself in the conversation between Georgia and Texas, that conversation we were just having about those two, is the number 4 team in the country, and it's headed on the road to Madison to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. The Alabama Crimson Tide laying 16 and a half on the road against Wisconsin. They beat South Florida last weekend, Choppy, by a big score, but I'll be honest, it did not look good until late. It was 14-13 going into the fourth quarter. Then you get another big play from Ryan Williams, who's barely old enough to drive, let alone play college football. They outscore South Florida 28-3 in the fourth quarter. On the other side of this thing, Wisconsin's 0-2 against the spread to start the season, and they've only put up a combined 55 points, with Tyler Van Dyke averaging a dink and a dunk every other attempt. That was against Western Michigan and South Dakota. So 16 points, too much in this one with Bama on the road and looking uninterested for the first 45 minutes last week? Or is there no way the Badgers keep up with the Tide?
Look, 16 points for this Bama team it seems like a lot right now. I'm totally with you. That was not a, 30, 26 point spread. I'm not a math guy, whatever. That was not what that game was last week. That was a very, very tight game. Going into the second half, going into the fourth quarter. So yeah, I would be leaning Wisconsin in this one. I wonder how much Bama is getting the benefit of the doubt of being Bama. It's not the same. I like DeBoer. He's a good coach. Milroe's a fine quarterback, but it isn't the same. And the NIL was a big part of that, and they haven't been the same for a couple of years. So, I wonder how much of benefit of the doubt they're getting in the mind of bettors, in the mind of the public. So, yeah, I would probably lean towards Wisconsin. I think Bama wins. I think they're a better team. But, short of a 28-3 fourth quarter, I don't think they cover the spread.
Yeah, John, I mean, a 16 and a half might be a lot. Although, again, the way Bama decided to step on the gas in the fourth quarter last week, granted at home against South Florida, maybe this is a different beast, but it would tell you that this could be one of those ones where you think maybe Bama's going to get a scare, and then all of a sudden, bang, they take off again in the final 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I didn't hear any credit for the South Florida Bulls. Did that get edited out?
How dare we disrespect USF like that?
Yeah, I mean that's why I take my responsibility on this show very seriously as the Group of Five ambassador.
That's true.
Neither of you clowns is going to do it. All right?
No,
you're just not.
We're not.
So,
we're not.
I got to do it. I think South Florida. I think Golesh, and you should know this, RJ. He was at Tennessee, right? I think I think he might be one of the next, Group of Five coaches that gets a shot. I mean, this is 2 straight years now of USF playing Alabama really tight, and that quarterback I think is pretty special. So they'll get better as the year goes on, no doubt about it. As far as this one goes, I really don't have any interest. I think you look for reasons in 2024 to play unders with the helmet comms and everybody taking at least until the 15-second mark on the play clock to do anything now, because that's when the helmet shut off. This feels like an under to me. Do I love it? Am I super excited about it? No, but I think I would probably, if forced to play something on this game, be under 49.
That's not a bad call. Started at 50 and a half, 50-ish, and has come down a little bit. And even as it comes down, might make sense, given the fact that, like I said, I don't expect anything great out of the Wisconsin offense. And this basically boils down to how interested are Jalen Milroe, Ryan Williams, the rest of the Tide's offense in taking care of business early in this one and maybe putting a couple extra touchdowns, icing on the cake late, or do they end up winning this, 35-14 and covering, but still hitting right around that total, because that's entirely possible as well. Another SEC game, kind of SEC hosting ACC. And like I said a couple of times so far in today's show, nobody had this pegged as a matchup of ranked teams coming into the season. But here's number 24, Boston College. Another redemption arc for Bill O'Brien. Your cousin from Boston headed into Missouri to take on the number 6 Tigers, who are laying 17 and a half to the BC team that, squashed Cupcake Duquesne last week, but also upset Florida State the week before that. And Missouri dealing with some injuries after wins over Murray State and Buffalo. They still haven't given up a point, by the way. 89-0. They've outscored those two teams. Luther Burden III left last week's game in the second quarter with an illness. Theo Weiss Jr. also left early in that one with a sore hip, I believe it was. There's a couple injuries around for Missouri in this one, but I don't know if that's enough for this BC team to go in and upset Missouri on the road in the SEC. 17 and a half, though, John. That feels like a big number.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think Bill O'Brien is doing a really good job. Now, I mean, could I make the case that they had, an advantage over Florida State in the first game there because they had a game of tape and Florida State did not? Sure. But we're not talking about that Florida State game anymore. This is about 16 and a half, 17, against a Missouri team that has looked like, good, but they've pulled off in some of these games. And I just think Boston College, with the way they run the ball and their commitment to this thing, I think Bill O'Brien's going to scheme his way and be able to scheme his way to a cover here. I just think this is too many points with the tempo they run. I don't even care if they get down. I just think they're going to run their stuff. They're going to find ways to move the ball. And I just think at the very least you're ripe for something backdoor here. But I think Bill O'Brien's doing a really good job at Boston College. I don't think they're a fluke. I don't think they're an accident. And I know the number is what the number is for a reason. But, if I'm playing a side on this one, it is going to be Boston College. Two plus scores, basically, with 2-point conversions. I just think, this is too many. Even if you're down on Florida State, they still went there. Tough place to play and dominated the game. They dominated the game. I don't care how low you might be on Florida State. Babbage teams cannot do that. And this is sort of a line that I would assume of a Babbage team. So I would be on Boston College in the points here.
Man, I'm with you. I'm on BC here. Bill O'Brien's a really good coach, really good college coach. And, I mean, he's a really good coach general, just to be fair. I think it's a solid football team. Missouri's good, but they're still Missouri. I wonder how much of this line is still perception that Boston College is one of those teams that doesn't get players, that can't get players, that has no NIL, that has nobody else. They're just a well-coached team. And John's right. I mean, they went into Florida State, and they put it to them. And bad teams don't do that. On the road, Florida State's got a good roster. Like a good roster. Like I would venture to guess that there are minimal amount of players on Boston College that could actually start for Florida State. And probably the same in this game, for that matter. But I'll take BC. I think they're well coached. I love Bill O'Brien here.
Big Bill O'Brien fan over here as well, after the way he saved Penn State's rear end coming in and taking that job at that point in time. Castellanos' quarterback has yet to throw an interception in those first two games against Florida State and Duquesne. He's got 6 touchdowns. He's got 1 on the ground. We'll see if they can put up the points against Missouri. And again, if their defense can hold up against Missouri's passing attack, which, again, feels very dependent on Luther Burden being 100%. But we'll see how that goes. 17.5, I think is starting to get a bit too much. If this thing would come down closer to 2 touchdowns, I think I would be on the other side. But I think as it stands right now, I probably lean BC with you guys. Saturday night, we mentioned this one earlier. Kentucky hosting the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, laying 24.5 on the road at Kentucky, who's fresh off an real ugly, that I mentioned, ugly loss to South Carolina. They were minus 400 on the money line, 9.5-point favorites. They lost by 25 at home to the Gamecocks. Their offensive line is a disaster right now. They've given up 5 sacks for 41 yards in the South Carolina game alone, 11 tackles for loss in that game. They're in big trouble. Georgia, on the other side, their defense has yet to give up a touchdown, John. They've outscored Clemson and Tennessee Tech combined 82-6, a field goal for each of them. So 24.5 is a big number, but I get the history of Georgia going into Lexington and struggling at times. I just went full Joe Namath, struggling 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 against Kentucky. But I think Kirby puts it on them this week.
I don't care about that. I don't care about the history. I care about the present. I mean, and this Kentucky team is disgusting. I mean, people were coming into the last week saying, how is South Carolina going to score? They come in, they put up 31 with a terrible, among the worst in college football quarterback in Sellers, and they put up 31. Now, some of that obviously was defensive, but it doesn't really matter. You put up 6 at home. Vandegrift is this aggression cannot stand. I know they're going to play, multiple quarterbacks, but this was 15 last year in Athens, minus 15, and that was with an NFL quarterback in Leary, or at least a drafted NFL quarterback in Devin Leary. These guys, you combine them, they're not getting drafted to the Memphis Showboats, right? So I just have no problem laying this number with Georgia. They're a well-oiled machine. And I think they're going to kick the crap out of Kentucky up and down the field on Saturday.
That's a big number on the road, though, right? It's a tough number. But I agree in general. That is Kentucky just isn't very good right now. Not at least compared to Georgia. You want to compare them to some other teams? Fine, we could have the discussion. But I think the total is also one that you could play into. That's kind of I get it. I get it. Kentucky's offense isn't great, but I mean, you can find your way into 10 points, which means that all you got to do, if you think Georgia's going to cover, then you kind of if you think Georgia's going to cover, you absolutely should do a little double play there and play the spread and the total.
John, two questions since you brought them up. Is there a Memphis Showboats Hall of Fame? And if so, are Reggie White and Lex Luger the only two members?
Definitely Reggie. I'll have to call and check on Lex. We just got the email today about renewals. We were wondering, would we get a third season? It appears as if we will. But I will say this about the Showboats front office. They drafted Jason Bean and Blake Watson, both of whom made either a practice squad or an NFL game day roster. So they must have some idea of what they're doing down here. I will say that for them, which is why they would never draft these Kentucky quarterbacks, these clowns. They would never draft those guys.
Never.
So, yeah, we
Not
are
even
in the third season, if anybody was wondering.
One more game real quick. Speaking of ugly, A&M, Texas A&M going to the Swamp to take on the Florida Gators. A&M laying 4 on the road. This feels like a loser leaves town kind of game. 3.5, 4 points, whatever the spread is. It's a little more than a field goal. It's the conference opener for each one, Choppy, but neither team can really afford to be 1-2 after 3 weeks. Florida, I mentioned the term dog walking earlier. It probably applies more so to the way Florida looked in their opener against the Canes than anything else, and at home, and they don't know who their quarterback is. It's Graham Mertz. It's DJ Lagway. Might be both. A&M, their own QB issues, which you alluded to earlier with Connor Weigman. I don't know. This is an ugly game. It feels like, after what John mentioned earlier about unders, this one's 46.5, I think, 47.5. It's gone up throughout the week. This feels like a good underplay, RJ.
Feels like a great underplay. These two teams stay. I don't think these two teams could combine for 47 points against air. Their quarterbacks. How in the world of NIL do you have these quarterbacks on your team as the starters coming into the season through camp? I think this is an underplay. If I'm going to play this, I don't trust either team to cover a spread. My goodness. I mean, A&M, if Notre Dame losing to NIU tells you anything about A&M at home, and then the way Florida just got worked by Miami, good Miami team, good. Let's not confuse them with Ken Dorsey in Miami in 01, but a good Miami team. I would not touch the 3.5.
John, real quick, any thoughts? Give me 10 seconds of ugliness that is A&M Florida.
Florida fans deserve better.
That kind of sums it up. I think.
With any luck, the Gators will get their butts kicked this weekend.
Billy Napier going to have to – maybe he'll get a second chance at opening that bottle of water at the podium. Rivalry games this week. Apple Cup, Civil War in the Pacific Northwest, backyard brawl between Pitt and WVU, and the Pac-2 becoming the Pac, I don't know, something. More teams on the way from the Mountain West, plus our best bets next here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for. I get it. Now it's okay. 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends, and it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Alongside John Martin and RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. This is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Here every week, every Friday night and Saturday morning to get you ready for that weekend's college action. We've rolled through some game previews, talked about last week, and let's talk about a couple other things going on this week. Before we get to some of those rivalry games I mentioned, let's talk about the Mountain West getting raided, guys. This makes sense to an extent here that Oregon State and Washington State were going to try to do their best to survive in a power conference by going after some of these Mountain West teams that they have an arrangement with. What's going to be interesting, I think, Choppy, is who's next, because going out and adding these 4 teams from the Mountain West in Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Boise, That only gets you to 6. You got to get to at least 8 to be considered a conference. I don't know if that's stealing Stanford and Cal back from the ACC, if that's a play on UNLV, or I don't know. But it's not going to feel, I don't think anyway, like it's going to belong even on the same level as the ACC and Big 12, let alone the big boys in the SEC and Big 10.
Yeah, this is a temporary move. Stanford and Cal, they've already signed the grant of rights. It's too late for them. They're stuck with the ACC. This is essentially all this is rebranding the Mountain West with the name the Pac-12. Right? That's all it is, which is fine. I mean, the Pac-12 has a name. It's got a better naming. It's got more cachet to it. But I really feel bad for Oregon State and Washington State. I mean, I really do. They did nothing wrong. The only thing they did wrong is that they're really hard to get to. That's it. Like, they did nothing else wrong. It's just that they play in little small towns, and those small towns are just on the outposts of the United States, the Pacific Northwest. But bringing in San Diego State and Fresno State, and I mean, it'd have been great for them, really great if Utah State and BYU was available. That'd have been great. That'd have made a lot of sense. These teams make sense for them, but like, what's the long-term viability here? They're just hoping that they merge the Big 12. That's it, right?
Yeah.
They probably just hope that they can get enough viability to merge the Big 12 to get a big TV deal.
Yeah, John, this doesn't feel like it's long-term anyway. I think to Choppy's point, there's more name value in the Pac, whatever number you want to put after that,
six-pack,
than the Mountain West. Yeah. There's more name value there, but if the teams are the same as the Mountain West, basically, then it's just the Mountain West with a prettier name.
Well, I think there actually is an opportunity here if they want to take it, which they can kill everybody else if they really want to. They can go for the kill shot, and they could raid the American and take Memphis and take Tulane and take South Florida, and they could say there are 5 leagues that matter, and that's it. The group of 5 doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you guys can take the best of whatever you did, the Sun Belt and that they will never sniff the group of 5 spot, right? They will never. It will be designated for the Pac number, the Pac-12, the Pac-14, the Pac-16. They can essentially go for and that's how it's viable. That's how it's long term. Is that we say, all right, we're going to assemble the group of 5 Avengers and Oregon State and Washington State. And we're going to make sure that our access, like, we're ending it. This is where the line cuts off. We had this discussion in Memphis because Memphis is a team that came up, right, via some reports as a team that they might target. And people are like, well, why would you want to leave a sinking ship, in the American for another sinking ship? No. I think you got it all wrong. The American is not a sinking ship. The American is Ocean Gate Titan that is about to implode any minute now in the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, let's be clear about what the American is. It's awful. Rice, Tulsa, East Carolina. You can't be in a league with teams like that and try to, pretend that you're a serious team and a serious football program, a serious athletic program. So I think the way that the Pac-12 has to do this is they have to say, listen, we know we're not the Pac-12 of old, but what we can do is we can bring in the top 3, top 4 teams from the AC with what we've got in the original 6, and we can really make a play on cutting this off for everybody else.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
And that's a good league. That's a good league.
Yeah.
Memphis, Boise State, Tulane, Oregon State, Washington State, San Diego State. I mean, it's not a power league, but these are all the schools when we talk about the group of 5 for the most part that anybody cares about, right?
Yeah, and you're right. It clearly becomes, if we're stratifying the conferences, it clearly becomes the 5th if they pull the crust, the cream of the crop off the top of the AAC. Absolutely. Yep. So it'll be interesting to see if Memphis and Tulane, and you mentioned South Florida, if those programs have interest. UNLV have interest in joining that group, especially the ones that are in the South and are, again, geography doesn't matter nearly as much anymore. We're in a world where the aforementioned Stanford and Cal are in the ACC. It's more about, to your point, John, finding viability and a long-term, repeatable, consistently repeatable path to the playoff, which is where the big money is going to be. It is BetQLU.
Cool, right? You got to make it cool. Just base it in Vegas. Put it in Vegas. That brings your cool factor up. Your
we
home
got
base
direct flights in Memphis. We got direct flights to Vegas. Come on, dog.
Yep. Base it in Vegas. Do what you can. Do what you can to make it cool. Just make it fun. That's all you can do. Because John's right. Like you get the best of the group of 5, and that is the new group of 5. And the other schools like the Akrons. I mean, anybody in the Mack. It's like, what are you gonna do?
Done. Yeah, they're done.
Yep.
Real quick, a couple of teams that we just got done talking about have rivalry games this week, as they're not in the same conference with their rivals anymore. Apple Cup is Saturday afternoon on Peacock. Cougars now getting as much as 5 on the road. Technically, I mean it's at Lumen Field in Seattle, so technically it's a neutral site game, but it's going to be more of a Huskies crowd there. You've also got the Civil War. Oregon State and Oregon, that a much bigger spread. Beavers getting 16.5. And then out this way, you got the backyard brawl, guys. West Virginia laying 2 on the road at Pitt, who's coming off a big comeback win over Cincy last weekend. Which of these games you think ends up, being the most watchable, I guess, of these 3 rivalry games, and also ends up having the most impact, John?
I don't know.
Any of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be the right answer. I mean, I'm on Oregon, so it has the biggest implications for me. That rivalry game. So, I mean, I don't. What I would like to see for the Ducks is like, I mean, you come in with, all the plaudits and new quarterback and this returning offensive line, and I mean, it's been a real effort. It's been a real effort for the Ducks so far this year, offensively and defensively, every phase. So I would really like to see them put together a complete. I mean, Dan Lanning last year was scoring putting up basketball scores, right? It was like 84-7, against Eastern. I would have seen 84-point performance from the Ducks again. So I guess I'll say Oregon, just from their standpoint, like they kind of need to show that they're worthy of. I mean, they were a team that people were picking for the championship, right? I think RJ might have picked them to win the title, or one of you guys did. So they need to show it. They need to show that they can be in that conversation, that they belong.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the Oregon State game is the most watchable because Oregon is the most watchable of those teams, and that makes it watchable. The interesting thing about the Washington State is like they decided to make this a neutral site game, and they're not selling any tickets. I mean, it's like half full right now. They for whatever reason they're just not selling tickets, and I don't know how much of that is the Washington State fans just don't want to buy it, or because like certainly, it's not just they're not just in Pullman. Like Washington State fans are throughout the Northwest, so there should be 30,000 in the Seattle area that'll buy tickets. They're just disinterested, and I wonder if that's just the problem of them not being conference foes anymore. It shouldn't matter. South Carolina and Clemson are still a rivalry. Texas and Texas A&M are still a rivalry, even though they didn't play where they left. I mean, it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, Pitt and West Virginia both are exceedingly average this year, and Heinz Field will have 50,000 people in it this weekend for that game. So, yeah, the rival it shouldn't matter, but you're right. As for Oregon, I was the guy, but their offensive line sucks this year so far. And also, I like Washington State getting 5, which you can still get. That's probably my best bet, not just of those games, but of the entire weekend right now. I really like you can't. For me, you can't say, "Oh, Jed Fish took Arizona into Pullman last year and beat up on the Cougars." Different team, completely different team. This is Washington. This is a pissed off Washington State, and I think an opportunity for them to make a statement in what is being called a neutral site game, but there will be more Washington. There will be more Huskies fans there. Best bets before we wrap up. Choppy, what do you got for us this weekend?
Give me Texas minus the 35.5 against UTSA. I love Jeff Traylor down at UTSA, but I mean, they got worked by Texas State. Texas, I thought, was too big of a spread against Colorado State at 32.5. So I took Colorado State, and I looked foolish by halftime. I think that number's too small. I think 35.5 is too small. UTSA, this is not the same UTSA team we saw a couple of years ago. So I'll take Texas in the 35.5.
John, what do you got?
I have a total. It's Memphis, Florida State over 53.5. I don't think Memphis's defense is that much better. They played nobodies in the first 2 weeks, and so it's hard for me to believe that they have made some kind of drastic improvement. And I think Florida State, with a week to prepare, obviously all the whispers there. I mean, they're going to get a group of 5 defense. There's no better get right for a team that's had the first couple of weeks that they've had. So I look, Memphis is an elite chase team. They're going to open it up. They're going to see some one-on-one coverages. Seth Hennigan's on 6 award watch lists. I think this is a very, very high-scoring game.
One more. We're all in agreement on Colorado State getting a touchdown at home in their Super Bowl against Coach Prime, Shador, and the Buffaloes of Colorado. You can check us out every week live Friday nights and Saturday mornings on the BetQL Network, live coast to coast, always every week on the Odyssey Sports YouTube channel as well, and always on demand right here inside your free Odyssey app, AUDACY. Download it today if you have not yet. For producer Zach Kroll, for John Martin, for RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. This has been BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. how does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose
team.
outright. Who